Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Ben Powers coming at you from the Commander's Voice. My guest tonight is Mr. Andrew Biggio. Andrew is the author of a fantastic book called The Rifle. He's also a former combat Marine from the United States Marine Corps Reserve, and he's currently serving a police officer in Winthrop, Massachusetts. We're also joined by a friend of the show, George Lewis Jr. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Hey, really excited to have you on, Andy. George kind of contacted me out of the blue on this one. Said, "Hey, Ben, what's next? What do you want to do with the podcast?" And we were just kicking around some ideas and says, "Hey, well, if you talk to Andrew Biggio," I'm like, "I have not. I don't know a thing about Andrew." And he's like, "Okay, we got to get Andrew on the show." So obviously the book is called The Rifle. Some of my listeners may have heard of it, but if you could give me some rundown about what the book's about, what motivated it, and we'll just start a conversation.
Sure. The book's about a young Marine who comes home from his own military service full of questions, and who are the best people to consult with the most life experience? America's oldest generation of veterans, which currently right now are our World War II guys. So the book is really about America's youngest generation of veterans bonding with the oldest one, the guys who saw hellish combat, came home, lived successful lives, lived long lives, had careers, schooling, marriages, children, life lessons, and into their 90s, and what a young veteran can take away from hearing these stories. And that, in this case, was me, my journey to meet about almost 215 of them, learning different things. And the way I was able to do it sometimes a little bit better than other people, was through a microphone, but not really a microphone. It was through an M1 Grand. And it was this M1 Grand here, which contains all their names of all 215 World War II veterans that I consulted with on how to live a successful life after warfare, after combat, and then most of all, just still continuing to raise awareness of what they actually went through in the 1940s in either the Pacific theater or the European theater. The story is influenced by my 19-year-old great uncle who gave his life, who died in Italy on September 17th, 1944. And I began to read his letters when I came home from Afghanistan, just kind of trying to figure out, why I was spared, my namesake, why I was spared, and that this kid had to pay the ultimate sacrifice. He never got to have a family, never got to go to college, never got to have a girlfriend. Really, what does one know at age 19 besides him bleeding out on a hill in Italy somewhere? And I wanted to learn more about him and possibly meet people who were there with him. And in one of his first letters, he talks about the M1, that rifle right there that I was just holding. And I had to go out and buy one. And I went out and bought one, and I'm playing with it in my house. And the satisfactory level of holding that M1 Grand only lasted for so long because I needed to know more. Now what? Could I possibly find survivors that he was with? But in the meantime, I took it to a local World War II veteran by the name of Joe Drago, who fought in the Battle of Okinawa. And I had known Joe for numerous years. And when I put this rifle into his hands, when I knocked on his door, the once crouched over old man was 19 again, holding this. He was smiling from ear to ear. He was waving it around, telling me all about the Battle of Okinawa, right? April Fool's Day, 1945, going into the first wave of Okinawa. And he's holding my rifle, telling the story. And we talked for about 4 hours, and I was captivated. I recorded all of it on my phone. And I know I often wonder, because it's been years since I've listened to his voice, what it's going to be like to listen to his voice again on that record, because half of the men on that rifle are gone now. And the day that I have to give that rifle to a museum, I'm going to friggin' cry like a baby. I am just going to be a mess, because they weren't just some guys I went and visited and, hey, sign my rifle, pal, and I'm gone. I ended up developing a relationship with these men. Hey, do you want to go back to Belgium during the Battle of the Bulge? Do you want to go back to Normandy? Hey, you never saw a Sherman tank again? Can I bring you to a museum where there is one? Oh, you have no one to take you grocery shopping? Sure, I'll come by back on Sunday and take you grocery shopping. I mean, they became really my brothers, my friends. And And Joe was the first signature. And after I heard his story, I just was like, okay, well, now I need someone from the European theater. Oh, well, I have the European theater now. Maybe someone who fought in Burma. Okay, well, now I need someone who was in the air war, the flying a B-17. I wanted to represent the whole war in that rifle. And that's what sparked the book, The Rifle, by me. Best-selling one at that, number one best-selling book. And that's all great and well, but I'm just glad that, it sparked all these young kids like 15, 17, 18 years old who follow me on Instagram, and they're being educated more by my Instagram page than their own high school.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's what I'm most proud of.
So you kind of indicated at the beginning that this was sparked by your dealing with, we'll call it, survivor's guilt when you got back from Afghanistan. And please don't let me put words in your mouth, but I think a lot of my viewers understand what a post-deployment feeling is like. How do you find success post-deployment? And you were already, I'm assuming, a pretty successful guy. You're a police officer. I think you were a surfing cop at the time when you went over to Afghanistan, correct? So,
yep. I was, before I even wrote the book, I had finished my master's degree. I was in college. I was a police officer. And I had steady things going. I knew what I wanted to do since I was about 5 years old: be a Marine, be a cop, period, end of story. I did not realize I would go down this rabbit hole. When I got back from Iraq in 2008, I met a young paratrooper, 82nd Airborne, who had his whole skull replaced with plastic after he got hit by an IED. And I was like, holy crap, like, this is really the real price of war. Like, I had known guys that had gotten shot or blown up, but this kid had a cranial replacement, and he went from being a proud, healthy, brave paratrooper to, at age, 26, to being an 8-year-old in a 26-year-old body, because of the mental brain damage.
Certainly.
And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a motorcycle charity ride for this kid. This is back before I was into World War II. I just wanted to put a new roof on his house because the VA at that time was, I jumped through a bunch of hoops to get a VA housing modification grant. So I did a motorcycle charity ride for him, and I raised, we like 300 of us showed up on motorcycles. We rode for him, we raised some money. 11 years later, I've been choosing different wounded veterans to do that ride for. And it's the biggest motorcycle charity in New England. And it's a nonprofit. I don't take a dime of salary. I've raised millions for severely wounded veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. So I was set. I didn't have to prove anything to anybody. I was on my own route. I fell down this World War II rabbit hole in 2016 when I was passing my uncle's sign again, Andrew Biggio Square, Andrew Biggio Square, Andrew Biggio Square, every day coming home to and from Winthrop, looking at my own name on a memorial square. And I had it. I don't know if there was a breaking point in me, with that, like you said, coming home with that stress of deployment and everything else and the police force and building up. And I said, I want to get down and dirty what these World War II veterans went through. And I must have been probably 50 or so signatures in. And I said, wait a second, let's get some guys from the Red Bull division. Let's find out what actually happened in Italy.
So when you're talking about passing your uncle's memorial square, and that's kind of what's lit the fuse in you, but you've also articulated the successful guy, master's degree career. Has that resonated with your generation of veterans? Because you've got a following on Instagram of the young kids that learn about World War II history. You're obviously doing great things for the greatest generation, but there's got to be another leg to this stool, so to speak. Are you getting feedback from your generation of veterans? Are they getting something out of the book?
I know guys, when my book first came out, there's people out there that were like they read books in one night. I don't know how they do that. But they did. And I was having some serious dudes that I knew, snipers with confirmed kills, buddies of mine that had been shot, real combat dudes saying, Andy, like, you made me cry. Andy, this book is phenomenal. I mean, that to me was like, okay, I did this right. If these guys, if I want a young veteran to pick up this book and say, who might be saying, poor me, I had a stressful time in Iraq or Afghanistan, open a book and find out like, holy crap, like that's what happened at the Battle of the Bulge. Like this is what this guy was wounded, was a POW, was starved, but he came home and lived till he was 98 and had a family, a life, and was successful and was a police officer. Like, holy shit, if he can do it, so can I. You know, that's what I wanted the young veterans to learn and to pick up from it. And I think I'm getting that, and I know I'm getting that because the response and the feedback's been great.
No, that's absolutely outstanding. Now, George, how did you and Andrew get linked up? You got me hooked up with him. I'm just kind of interested in the Band of Brothers connection, as it were, because I know we were talking a little bit before about Mr. Drago and the Pacific. I know there's a Spielberg-Hanks nexus here.
Yeah, actually there was. I met Joe Drago at the premiere of the Boston Pacific, and actually Andy was there as well, and Joe was there with a friend of his, Dan, who was a police officer, and I find out that it's a friend of Andy's as well. He happened to be just sitting next to me at the premiere, and my wife and I started a conversation with Joe, and he told me the story on how we got in. And, you know, this is a typical can-do type of an operation. You know, they were trying to get tickets for this particular event, and I guess it was a tough ticket to get. And Joe just told his buddy Dan, hey, look, we're just going to go there. I'll get in. We'll get in. And he shows up at the line, and the two young ladies are at the line, and he walks up to the girl and says, the lady said, hey, what's your name? And he said, Joe Drago. And she's looking through the papers and can't find his name. She looks over at the other girl, and she looks back up, and he looks at her and says, I was there. And without missing a beat, she grabbed the program, a hat, gave it to him, and he was on his way. And you know, that's just awesome. An example of, you know, that generation's ability to get it done one way or another. And that's how we're connected with Andy. He ended up developing a great friendship with Joe as well. So,
oh, that's true.
Yeah, and you know, who doesn't know Luz from Band of Brothers, right? So I always knew of a George Luz Jr. I always knew that he was out there somewhere. And then Joe Drago mentioned it to me 6 years ago, whatever it was. And then, you know, my grandfather also was with the 10th Armored Division, also trapped in Bastogne with the 101st, with the 506. You know, that's a little unknown story to a lot of people who don't know that Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division was right there with those guys. So, you know, when I think about Easy Company, you know, 506 or any of those guys that were in Bastogne in the siege, I think about my own grandfather who was wounded December 30th there. So
wow. That's an amazing legacy of service for your whole family, Andrew. Now, you had indicated before that after you met with Joe and you got his signature, you figured you were onto something and you started this quest to meet as many veterans as possible. At what point did this come from being a personal passion project? Hey, I just want to meet these guys, talk to them, and okay, now I got something bigger here. I've got to do something with this. Can you run us through that thought process a little bit?
I was probably, I said to myself, I want to get an ex-POW on the rifle and hear his story. You know, I remember when I first got my driver's license being at a gas station and seeing like a dude pull up and he had an ex-POW license plate. And I was like, holy, you know, this is so, I'm like, hey, thanks for your service. He's like, yeah, whatever, buddy, you know. And then, so I was like, you know, I got to find a POW. So I remember typing in POW World War II Massachusetts on Google and finding an article about a Worcester veteran named Clarence Cormier. So I had a buddy who lived in Gardner, Massachusetts. I said, hey, can you go ring this guy's doorbell for me? He was a POW. Tell him I get this. I want him to sign my rifle. You know, this is how I operated all throughout these 215 guys. I would either cold call them, write them letters, or just show up at their nursing home, you know? And whenever I went to nursing home, they're like, what's in the box? I'm like, oh, a violin, you know? And I would just sneak in the room and have them sign it.
Long stem roses. It's cool.
Yep. So, I got more stories to that. So Clarence tells my buddy, yeah, have him come on down. I go to his house And Clarence was with the 106th Infantry Division. And for those who don't know, the Golden Lions. And they had unfortunately, they're known for having the biggest surrender of World War II, actually one of the biggest surrenders since the American Civil War. The number's disputed, but it's somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 men surrendered at the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge of that division. Okay, that's pretty much half the division gone. And that's not, because people get very defensive on social media. Well, this, and I'm not saying they weren't a good unit or whatever. It's just they happened to be positioned exactly where the bulge broke, and they had only been in country for 2 weeks. They weren't even, most of them didn't even have all their ammo yet. They were just chilling in the Ardennes forest as a break-in method. Nothing was going on, supposed to be going on there. And next thing you know, bam, that's where the St. Vith, that's where the Germans really hit, and they got overrun.
Really the victims of an intelligence failure. Hey, we're going to break you guys in an easy sector, and it just wound up to be the wrong place at the wrong time.
So Clarence's first day of combat, and he's a POW, day one. Didn't even have ammo, yet. He was with Headquarters Company, 422nd Regiment. And an artillery show, they're getting shelled all morning, all night, and then boom, shell lands, killed a couple guys in front of him, wounds him, and next thing you know, he has a Mauser pointing in his face, and he's a POW. Clarence is then marched into a cattle car and sent into Germany, and they are nut to butt. You cannot move in these cattle cars. And of course, a couple of American P-47s see a German train in the open, and they're strafing the hell out of it. Little do they know it's filled with American POWs. Clarence is telling me this story at age 94, crying. Seeing a 94-year-old man cry is just, it's gut-wrenching. It's gut-wrenching that this man, after this long, can still cry about this. Them getting lit up by American planes, getting out of the Germans, let them out of the train car. And they form the letters POW with their human bodies. So when the planes are making their third strafe, they pull away.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, they pull away. And Clarence says, I can remember being on that ground, and I felt like I could reach up and touch the plane. That's how close freedom was. I could reach up and touch the plane. The pilot was, waving his kerchief that he saw us, and then that's when the strafing stopped. And Clarence stopped crying at that moment. And I remember leaving his house, and the story goes on. It gets great, and it's in my book. And I remember leaving his house and a daughter saying, I never heard Dad say that before. Dad never told us. Didn't even know what unit their father was in, never talked. That's when I said, this has to be more than just a selfish mission of a guy getting signatures on his rifle. And it's got to be, I got to tell the story a little bit more. I had to write it, I guess. And I wasn't a history major, and I wasn't an amazing student, but I did it, And it's funny. I'm sitting here in today's Pearl Harbor Day, and I'm looking at this name on the rifle here. I don't know if you can see it. Donald Stratton, USS Arizona.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was another crazy story.
That's amazing, with this being the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
So when you're going to write a book now, and you're like, okay, I'm a smart guy, but I'm not a writer. I'm not a history major, but you're going to make it happen. Obviously you have the passion for it. And you said you've gotten over 200 signatures on the rifle, and you got to neck it down to, 19 or 20 to make it into a book size format. So how did you determine who you were going to place in the book? Was there a Marine Corps bias? Was there an infantry bias? Was there a just, wow, that's a crazy story, no one's going to believe it kind of selection process? What was your method?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there was no Marine Corps Army bias. I definitely felt deeply connected to both. One, being a Marine, and then two, my family sacrifice with the U.S. Army during World War II. So I want to do half and half. I definitely wanted to tell the stories of the units you never hear about and men you never hear about. like the 87th Infantry Division, the 106th Infantry Division. We don't hear about these units. In most history, we're taught about the 101st Airborne jumping into Normandy and the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. That's like World War II 101. A lot of people have written books about it. How could I be different? What could I do? And I wanted to choose stories and divisions that we don't hear often about. And so that was a big part. And then 2 was stories that hadn't been told already. So that's the way I did it. You know, that's the way I chose the stories, because I wanted to make it unique and different. And so
that's really cool. I don't want to get any real spoilers out there, because I want to motivate people to find out more. But a follow-on question is just, I was going to save this for the end, but it's just coming out right now. With so many signatures and so many stories and such a small selection in the book, is there a rifle 2 perhaps in the works? Excellent. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm about 3 chapters into it. But when I did Rifle 1, I didn't have any kids. I have 2 sons now. I have 2 sons, and
congratulations.
And that was all during when I started Rifle 1. I had no children. I wasn't married, and you got to look. It's been 6 or 7 years now. You know, in that span.
No, that's absolutely amazing. So when you take these guys back to Belgium or to Normandy, or even just a stateside kind of museum, is that do you do that as part of a larger nonprofit work, or is this just, hey, out of the goodness of my heart, we're going to take a trip, man? Like, how do you arrange that?
So I started, like, through each of the veterans, I started to realize that many of them had never been back to first world countries. We're talking. It's not Vietnam, not North Korea, and I just out of a goofy thing, I asked a gentleman, hey, would you go back to Normandy? And he's like, I never wanted to, but yeah, I think I would now. And as soon as he said that to me, I reverted back to my motorcycle charity ride, and I looked at the bylaws. It says, if I can assist a wounded veteran, this guy was wounded in Normandy, right? Or wounded in Belgium, I can allocate some of these funds to help him get back to where he was injured, where he lost his leg, where he did this. That's part of our mission. And of course, the biker community, which had been helping me already with our Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, were absolutely for it. I brought these guys on stage during the motorcycle ride that was honoring Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, and they're cheering their heads off for these World War II guys. And one of the first trips I did is I brought Albert Bucciarelli back to Monte Cassino, where he lost his right leg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he had never been back to Italy, and we took him back and found his squad leader's grave that he had never seen before, and it was just, I actually got a regional Emmy for best military best military video.
Holy cow.
For that trip. And Al's fighting right now. He's in a rehab facility. He's fighting. He had pneumonia, and he's not doing too well right now. But yeah, and then the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge came around, and next thing you know, I went over with 17 World War II veterans to Belgium. That's amazing.
So that's fantastic, Andrew. This is just so much more to this story than just what you glean from.
And their family members too. I didn't just go with them. I let them all bring one family member.
Oh, that's amazing.
I raised about 70. I raised about 70,000 on the GoFundMe for that one.
That's so cool. And there's a lot there that you just, I've seen on Facebook, different aspects of the work you were doing. I never realized just how in depth it was though. So this is just amazing work. And on behalf of the veteran community, I'm sure you hear it all the time, but we appreciate what you're out there doing. Definitely looking forward to the second volume. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, so my guest tonight has been Andrew Biggio, and as always, we've been joined by our great friend George Luz. We've been talking about his book, The Rifle, and the great work he's done with the veterans community and bringing together the greatest generation, the current crop of veterans, and educating the young kids and learning a lot along the way. Andrew, it's been amazing having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Ben and George, thank you. Thanks for having me. George, thank you for reaching out.
Hey, thank you so much, Andy.
Hey, gentlemen, you guys have a good night.
Ciao.